Did you hear me?
I do hear you.
Okay. Shut off your camera and go onto mute. And in 5 minutes, I'll come on and then welcome you, and then you'll come on. Okay. We're gonna get. I usually give. I mean, we'll probably start at 8:02. I usually give like. But yeah, I hear you. Okay, good. Good evening, everybody, and welcome. Thank you for coming on time. We're going to wait exactly 2 minutes, and we will start. We'll just give a little bit of time for people to join. Stick with us. We'll be starting in exactly 2 minutes. Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome back to another exciting week. It's been a wonderful journey. These interviews, I've been enjoying them tremendously, and I'm actually very excited for tonight's interview. This is somebody who I know actually for many years, David Rappaport, brilliant and fine individual who has a very interesting career story, starting off in technology and then making his way from technology into finance. And he wants to share his journey because he believes that for the right people, this could be a wonderful path forward for a wonderful career, fusing technology and the world of finance. And so I want to welcome David Rappaport. Good evening, David, and welcome.
Thank you, Yeshua. Thank you for having me, and hello, everyone.
Okay, so I would say, by the way, this is my second interview with the Rappaport. I had the privilege several years ago to interview your father. He shared his amazing story working with IBM and working on Watson and great stuff. And I see his children are following in his ways in the world of technology. So let's get started here. Our classic style is we like to take people on a journey, and so that people could, a lot of people think that, from yeshiva, it's either, stardom or flop. No one realizes that there's a journey that takes place, and it's okay to bounce around, and it's okay to learn and to pivot. And, so we like to take people on a bit of a journey. So maybe tell us a little bit about how you got into technology, and then how from technology you got into finance. Less details, more the story side, and then we'll dig in from there into more of the details. So, kavod, as we say.
Thank you. Just to connect to what you said earlier about you having interviewed my father previously, it's actually my grandfather, my father's father, who started working in computers. He was an electrical engineer, not a computer engineer, but he used the very early generations of computers to build some of the circuit boards that he used in his work. So yeah, we do have a bit of a family tradition, but I know many people who are first generation computer programmers, and it's a very easy type of work to get into if you have to write Aptitude. My own story is that I actually never went to high school. I never went to college. I learned in Brunois, in yeshiva, and then I learned in Aliter, where we were together for some time. I went to Kollel after I got married, and I worked as a shliach for a couple of years, but I felt like it wasn't the right path for me, and I wanted something different. We're talking about 22 years ago, the year 1999, 2000. My father was working at IBM at the time, and he mentioned to me that IBM was desperately seeking IT specialists, computer specialists, and they were willing to retrain people who had a different background to learn computers. And I applied for that program and I got accepted, even though my background was very unusual. The only thing I could tell them that I had was smicha. I was a rabbi, didn't have any engineering background. I didn't even have high school math. I didn't have algebra and all the usual skill sets that engineers usually have. But I found myself having a real interest and aptitude for programming. I found that it was in some ways very similar to learning, and I did very well. And because I didn't have a college degree and I didn't have anything to show, I started doing a number of certifications, industry certifications. At the time, the Java programming language was fairly new, and I did some Java programming certifications. And I very quickly found my place within IBM. I started working for IBM, and I worked in a very interesting team. We built very interesting types of applications together with IBM Research. I worked at IBM Research for a couple of years, and I then wanted to make more money. So the one thing that I wasn't so excited about was my salary at the time, which was actually very good, but not great. And I wanted to make more money. So I wanted to get into finance. I'm not sure where you stop me at any point if you want to dig into anything. But
no, I got the one thing I would say is that IBM trained you and they got you a guaranteed spot right into IBM.
Yes, so that's a very unusual situation, and I recognize that. I was very blessed in that way. But I find today that there are many great programs for people to do something similar. At a very relatively low cost, one can become a programmer if they have the right interest and aptitude and perseverance. So that's important to say that I was very blessed in that way. That's very unusual that people will train you and pay you while they're training you and then giving you a guaranteed spot for work.
I mean, so clearly you were very good at what you did, that you felt that you could get more, more money and you could do better.
I'm not so sure that I felt that I was so good at what I did, but I definitely knew that other people, my peers at different companies, including other yeshiva boys that I knew who had also chosen a career in programming, were making a lot more money. And one of the key distinctions was that they were consultants and I was an employee. So as a consultant, you take on more risk because you don't have a guaranteed job, but you also get paid a lot more sometimes. And one of my friends in Switzerland at the time was making a lot more money than I was. And I thought, why don't I also take that path? So I became a consultant and I worked at a Swiss bank. And I had always been interested in investing, just like today when everybody's investing. The year 2000 was also a time when everybody was like investing and thinking and talking about it. So I realized when I started working at the bank that people were studying for this program called CFA. That stands for Chartered Financial Analyst. And it's a very rigorous program of self-study with 3 exams. And if you pass all 3 exams, you're allowed to call yourself CFA, a Chartered Financial Analyst. And I learned that this was an entryway into finance. If you had this certification, you could basically get a job at any great financial institution, and you could kind of move away from IT to finance, which is a much more lucrative, potentially lucrative career.
But totally leaving behind everything you were doing. I mean, in other words, a CFA.
That was not my path. That was not my path. It could have been. Many people do that. They essentially study for the CFA and they end up working in finance and not in IT at all. But my path has been, and it still is 20 years later, to combine finance and computer technology. So
one quick question on that in terms of CFA. So you don't need a college degree for CFA. So again, it's a certification if somebody is fascinated by finance.
You need a college degree and you also need industry experience. However, they accepted my smicha from Lubavitch Yeshiva as a college degree, and so did Goldman Sachs later. So anybody who has an opportunity to get an official diploma from one of the yeshivas where you learned, this is a very useful thing that will help you over and over again throughout your career. And the other thing, the work experience, you can often find people who will employ you and will testify on your behalf that you have that work experience. So in my case, even though I had never worked in finance, I had worked in IT related to finance, that was enough to get the CFA designation. But even if you don't get the actual designation, and even if you don't pass all 3 tests, if you even say that you're studying towards the first level of the exam, that's usually already very impressive to potential employers. They love to see that. They see that you're interested in finance. And if you already passed 1 level, you can put that on your resume. And if you passed 2 levels, you can put that even more so. And it's a very powerful entryway into the world of finance. It's a very, very difficult exam. For me, it was extremely difficult because I didn't even know high school math. And initially, when I looked at their books, it was full of formulas and things that I didn't even know how to read. But I learned and I made my way through it. And anybody who is interested and is, dedicated can do it.
So you did all this just out of self-interest. You just were fascinated by it.
No, not out of self-interest, not out of curiosity. I wanted to have good income for myself and my family.
So you know, wait a second. So in other words, you took these things expecting
while I was working.
While you're working, but I'm saying expecting to then utilize the credentials.
Absolutely.
Right. Understood. How expensive is it to get a CFA?
The CFA at the time was very, very affordable, and I think it still is. I think you probably today, the cost went up a little bit, but I think it's less than $2,000 per level. I think the total cost is less than $5,000, and you may want to purchase extra materials and maybe get a tutor or take a class. So it may cost a little more, but it's considered at least equivalent to an MBA, and an MBA is 100,000 or more. So CFA is actually in many ways better than MBA because it's the same exam all over the world. So an MBA is not a protected word. Any college can create an MBA program. So the Harvard MBA is not the same as an MBA from some other university, but the CFA, regardless of where you got it and when you got it, it's always very prestigious and very accepted and very well known also.
Wow. Okay. So there you are. You got the certification while still working in programming. And then what happened at that point?
So at that point, I was still working and living in Switzerland at the time, and I moved to New York, and I got a job in a financial firm, and then I applied, and I was reading
Sorry, and when the financial firm hired you, they hired you for your programming skills or for your CFA?
Still programming.
Okay.
Yeah. And then I started reading about this thing called quantitative finance, and quantitative finance is something that started in the 90s, maybe in the late 80s, and became bigger and bigger and bigger. And till this very day, it's like the biggest trend in finance. And essentially what it is combining computer power, statistical methods, and a deep understanding of finance to make investment decisions. So instead of people picking stocks by reading the Wall Street Journal, you have computers reading feeds, like electronic feeds of information, processing that at very high speeds and great volumes, and then essentially making investment decisions automatically and also often executing trades automatically. And this is called quantitative finance. And the people who run these things, like they're often PhDs in statistics and computer science. And I was fascinated because I thought that was the future trend of computers, like essentially using computers to process information and to make decisions. And obviously today we are even further with AI, artificial intelligence, which was not yet a big topic then. But essentially I was super fascinated, and I saw an ad for a role at Goldman Sachs, Quantitative Investment Strategies, which was a group that managed over $100 billion in money, and they managed it using finance, computers and statistics. And I applied, and I was completely shocked when I was invited for an interview. And I was even more shocked when I got the job. So that was like a dream come true. And that opened my path into quantitative finance. And I've been working in this field since then. I worked at Goldman for a few years, and then I worked at other hedge funds. But that's basically still a lot of computer work. And most of the people who work in those hedge funds actually are computer programmers. Just some of them are much more statisticians and PhDs and mathematicians, and other people are more supporting them and building systems that allow them to do research and trading and all of that. So that's been the gist of my journey.
Right, so it's a great story and a great journey.
Thank you.
Really unbelievable. So let's unpack that now, and let's break it up, I guess, a little bit, just because we're sort of we're doing a double whammy here, programming and finance. So for people interested in programming today, are you? I mean, I know you're at this point, you're further in your career, but are you seeing? I know here in Crown Heights, there's quite a few people that are doing boot camps, and there's actually a beautiful new internship program that opened up in Crown Heights. There's an amazing company called Protege that's taking people that have at least a minimal exposure, and they're putting them into a training and into apprenticeship, which is really cool. But are you seeing, putting aside finance, we'll talk about finance in a second, but are you seeing, in terms of the world of programming, you're seeing that there's good opportunities for young people if people pursue, a boot camp or whatever it is? Companies are hiring, and it's still a very strong career path.
Yes. And not only that, I think it's more and more and more. It's so surprising, because already 20 years ago, the trend started to outsource a lot of work to India and China and other countries. And I was very concerned at the time that my career would fizzle out, that I would not.
I heard this many times.
And it never happened. The more that they outsourced, the more they needed people here to manage those people, to manage those projects. And the opportunities now are bigger than ever because of artificial intelligence, which is a completely new field that opened up just about 10 years ago, maybe a little more. And there's so many opportunities for people to find their way in this field. I'm very optimistic. I'm sure there's going to be, ups and downs, but the most important thing is that you need to really love this work. It's a very specific type of work that requires a lot of focus, concentration, attention to detail, creativity. You need to like it. If you don't enjoy it, don't force yourself. I mean, you can try it for a while, but you can't make yourself like it if you hate it. So if you love it, it's a great opportunity.
So unpacking that, we like to ask, what's a day in the life of a typical programmer? Putting the finance aside for a second, just a typical programmer will get into the office, sit down in front of their computer. What will they be doing for the next 8 hours?
So surprisingly, to many people who are not in the field, there's a lot more talking to people than talking to computers. You need to really talk to the people who want to build those programs to understand what they're trying to build. And that's often very difficult and takes a lot of time. And then you need to translate what they're telling you into computer language, and that you work with a team, you're in meetings. I now, at this point, I have like 6-7 meetings a day, but your typical programmer, when they start out, 1 or 2 meetings a day, getting in sync with your team. What are we working on? What are your challenges? What are you running into? Working on a feature, testing it, debugging it, releasing it, letting other people review your code, reviewing other people's code. A code is essentially the actual program that you're working with. And also supporting production systems, meaning code that has already been deployed. You need to make sure that they keep running, and there's always issues. As much as we would like to automate everything, nothing is fully automated and always needs people to pay attention and support. So your typical day will be I think one of the nice things about programming is that you're usually working during the day. You're not being called in the middle of the night to jump out of bed. There's not many emergencies, especially if you're working in finance. You can work from anywhere. I've been working from my home and been traveling a lot for the last 2 years. And you can really, as long as you have a strong internet connection and a great team, you can work from anywhere. And yeah, you're writing programs that eventually run in production and that do things.
So now again, still putting aside the finances, we're going to jump into it in a second. What is the financial opportunity in programming? So in other words, a junior programmer will make how much, and then if you build up to senior, what is the...
I mean, it really depends where you work, as with everything else. But I think that great junior programmers 1 or 2 years out of college can easily make 150K nowadays, and longer term, it depends really where they work. I mean, many people don't make that much, just to be clear. Like, I think many people start out at 60 and 70, but if you are lucky and you get into a great company, you could make more. I think longer term, if you're a single programmer on a team, in other words, you're not leading other people, you're not a manager or a team lead, I think the cap will be somewhere around 200,000-300,000, depending on how good you are and which company you work for. And again, assuming that you're just employed, you don't run your own business. If you run your own business, you can become Bill Gates, but that takes a lot of things. So just as an individual contributor, your opportunity, I think, probably caps at 250, 300, maybe even more if you work in a very specialized field. And if you're managing teams, you can go much beyond that. Like, if it depends how good you are and how many people you can manage and how productive your teams are, but you can probably make more than $1 million a year if you're a really great technologist.
Okay. All right. So now digging into the meat and potatoes here, especially, this is one of the reasons that I really wanted to do this with you. So you're very passionate about fusing technology and finance. And so this is a little bit more of a sophisticated conversation than the typical ones I have. So in other words, even if someone is already in programming and they're doing the programming, talk to people. In other words, you're a fan, you're advocating that people should actually look into the world of finance and see how they could jump into
only again if you have an interest in that. A lot of people find finance dead. They feel like it kills their soul because you're basically trying to make rich people richer or whatever. There's not a lot of meaning that you might get out of this work. So whatever field you're programming in, you're only going to be successful if you understand the business, and you understand the business very deeply. And every successful system, this is something that every programmer and IT manager knows, it consists of 3 parts. It consists of the system itself, and the system consists of computers and software and networks and all of that. We'll call that the system. And then it consists of processes, business processes, which is how do people actually go about doing their business using those systems. And the third and most important piece are people. The people who build those systems, the people who use those systems, the people who manage those systems, and so on. So if you have a narrow view and you just want to write code and you don't care about the business that you're in, you don't care about the people that you're working with, your opportunity is going to be very limited. But if you have a broader interest in what's going on around you and you're proactive and looking around and seeing opportunities and trying to be helpful to the business and trying to make whatever you do impactful for the business to create value, then your opportunities are much greater. So in my case, I work in the field of finance. Another person might work in the field of medicine or media or whatever. The important thing is to understand that business pretty well and understand how computers and IT is helping that business achieve its objectives.
So if somebody is a programmer and they are fascinated by finance, they should just approach a finance company, or they need to get the CFA in order to get into
I mean,
computers?
if they can get into finance company without the CFA, that's definitely something they should try. And
well, so I'm saying programmers for financial companies must have a CFA in order to be able to do.
Not at all. Most programmers in financial companies don't have a CFA. But if you do have a CFA, the CFA is really mostly for investment types of companies. The word finance is a very, very broad word, and it includes mortgage brokers, and it includes the mortgage brokers don't need a CFA. That's not an investment business necessarily. And even to invest in real estate, you don't need a CFA. CFA is much more for investing in public markets like stocks and bonds and currencies. So it depends really in which specific field of finance you're working. But wherever you go, if you can show and you can demonstrate that you have proficiency in the language of that field, you understand the concepts, you understand how those businesses work, you're going to be a much more useful person to the business. But if you ask me for a shortcut recipe to get into quant finance, yeah, I would tell you, if you're coming out of yeshiva, learn Python programming and do the CFA. Because if you can become a great Python programmer and you do the CFA, you just have so much information that will enable you to go to many places.
So now, a day in the life of somebody who's in the financials, is that any different than the regular programmer? Is there anything new? Is there any twist to that? Or
I don't think it's so very different. You're just interacting with people who are very smart, in my case, because they're like PhDs and whatever in math or statistics. So it's challenging. And, I always let myself be guided by better be the tail of the lions and not the head of the foxes. So I'm happy to be surrounded by people who are much smarter and much more educated than myself. I think and you need to understand the subject matter, but at the end of the day, you're still working in IT and you're still building systems. As your career progresses, you're not a programmer anymore. You're thinking about the bigger picture. You're thinking about how the pieces fit together. Like, imagine the difference between somebody who's laying bricks for a building and somebody who's architecting the skyscraper in Manhattan. It's a very different level of thinking and the level of conceptualizing problems and solutions. So in programming, you start out just writing lines of code, and then you're starting to think about how do all these different systems work together? How does the data flow through? How do people interact with those systems? How do we catch errors? How do we make things better? So that's a very different way of thinking. But that comes with time and with experience.
Understood. One of the questions we like to ask also is, you're out there, so to say, in the big world. I guess in your industry, do you find that people respect you for your Judaism?
Absolutely. I think in general in New York, obviously it's very easy to be a frum Jew and be very successful in any business. But in finance in particular, I've never once had an issue taking off for Shabbos, for Yontiv, showing up with a yarmulke, eating kosher. They will go out of their way and bend over backwards to make sure that when they have a holiday party, there is a section with kosher food, and when they plan an event that you can come. And like, it's literally, in my opinion, umnus kala onikia, like a very, very clean and easy work, like in terms of the hours, in terms of flexibility, and in terms of being able to accommodate your Jewish and religious requirements.
Okay. Now, a question that just came in, obviously from a fresh graduate. They want to know if you have any advice. If someone just finished with programming and they're going job hunting, what's your tips for how to land a really good job in technology or technology/finance?
Well, there's a few parts to that. And I don't think we have enough time to answer that in a full way, but there's interview techniques themselves. Like, how do you interview? In an interview, you need to find a way to connect with the person that you're talking to and show that whatever the problems that they're looking to solve, that you have some experience and understanding of those problems. So if you can make a connection between what you already know and what they're looking for, that's powerful. In terms of the industry, where do you even look for jobs? Be smart. Don't just take any programming job, because some industries cannot pay so well. If you go work for a small fashion label and they want you to build a website, you're not going to have the kind of career that you can have working for a JP Morgan or a bank. So if you're trying to make money, then go to an industry that has money and that is a big industry. And in terms of landing a great job, it's about, applying for the right jobs, putting the right keywords in your resume, making a great impression in your interview, following up after the interview, and reach out to me if you need help. I'm happy to, if I can, I'm happy to help.
So that's actually one of our questions. So if someone wants to reach out to you, how would they reach you?
Either by email or by phone.
And so
email is much better.
And your email address is?
Okay, it's david.rappaport@gmail.com. If you don't know it, reach out to Yeshua and he'll give it to you. And I think it's a long name, so I hope you'll remember it, or just reach out to Yeshua. I'll send it to you after this, and you can give it out to people who want to.
Okay. Yes. Okay. One more question that just came in. Hold on one second. Let me just take a look at this. Basically, again, another, obviously a very fresh person over here. If somebody is doing programming here for several years, they're already in programming, and they are fascinated by finance. How did one second, let me just read this right over here. How do you make the bridge? Basically, this is the question that the person's asking, to jump from the regular programming into the financial world.
I think having a certification is a shortcut. If you're looking for a shortcut, that's the shortcut that I recommend. Start studying for the CFA. If you have the opportunity, if you know somebody who works in finance or manages an investment fund and they're looking for a programmer, find a way to work for them and learn from them. The question is also, what do you want to do long term? Do you want to be an investor, or do you want to be a computer programmer? If you want to be an investor, you're not going to become an investor by writing programs for investors. You're going to become an investor by being an investor. So don't think that this is a shortcut for something else. This is a shortcut for career in IT. If you actually want a different type of career, then don't take the very long path through computers, because it's going to distract you from your objective, in my opinion.
Just out of curiosity, even though it's not the exact topic of something, I think if somebody is fascinated by finance and they take these CFA tests, you could get into a finance job just with the C, and like if somebody
I cannot guarantee it, but it's that I can tell you that in my case, I was able to get in to Goldman Sachs, which is a very difficult bank to work for generally. And I worked in their most quantitative group, which was very, very hard to get into. But because I had this combination of programming and finance, I was able to do that. So if you can do that, it allows you to get into places that you would otherwise not have an entry point. Unless you have like a great degree from like a master's in finance or something from Penn University or Harvard or Yale or MIT. So that's unfortunately for many of us too late to start going to these schools and doing this whole 6-7 year program. So that's, I'm just presenting a shortcut, a different way in.
Interesting. This is a comment that I've heard before. In other words, using technology, that's where, to get in, so to say, to these corporate companies, it seems like the bar is different. When it comes to technology, they'll take people without the
They're
fancy
looking for
degrees.
smart people.
Right.
And yeshiva boys, if you, I want to tell you this, if you weren't learning in yeshiva, you're probably not going to be a great programmer. If you didn't enjoy Gemara and Tosfos and whatever, you're probably not going to be a great programmer. If you don't like those level of details and focus and concentration, programming is just as hard. But if you do really enjoy using your head every single day and every single time, then you're going to be just as great as somebody who went to those top schools, because you also spent your time breaking your head and thinking and being creative and solving problems just like them, just different problems. So I'm not saying that it's the same thing learning Torah and going to university, but I'm just saying it's you will find yourself surprisingly well prepared for the world of business.
That's great. It's been a great conversation. Once again, everybody, David made a very generous offer. If any of you find this conversation fascinating, he's happy to talk with you. You could reach out to me and I'll put you in touch with him. So I want to thank you again, David, for making yourself available for this. And God, Hashem should bless you. You should have continued success, and looking forward to staying in touch. And
Amen. And thank you, and good success to all of your listeners. And I hope you'll all have great hatzlacha and a great career in the field that you choose.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Have a good night and a good yontif.
Thank you. Good yontif. Bye-bye.
All the best.